We are so happy that you're joining us for this edition of the SIP series On the Stir, brought to you by Gazelle Media. I'm your host, Trish Muyco-Tobin, and joining me is my special guest co-host, author, entertainment columnist, and sitcom producer, Debbie Baldwin. Hello, Debbie.
Hey, Trish. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So Debbie is the author of the newly released romantic thriller, Illicit Intent. And Deb, for fans of page-turning reads, this is a winner.
It's the reviews have really kind of left me speechless. I'm so proud of it. It's, I think it's a smart thriller with a great romantic component. So it's a nice balance for, any readers looking for both or either. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun so far. And, I'm just working on book 3 right now.
Oh goodness, you heard it here first. Book number 3 is in the works. And I love the fact, Debbie, that, we had talked about this in the past. You started writing because you were looking for something that at the time you really couldn't find. So you decided to create a novel that checked all the boxes for you as a reader.
Yeah, exactly. I was just like trolling Amazon one night and I like to read before bed. And I was like, oh, I want this, I want this, I want this. I want like a hot guy and a capable but beautiful woman.
Have
And
to
I
have a
want
hot guy.
a smart, intelligent thriller plot that keeps me guessing and some steamy romance. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to write what I want.
There you go. That's the way to do it. So the new book is Illicit Intent, and we can find that at all the online booksellers. Congratulations on the new book, Debbie.
Thank you.
All right, so this week is Mardi Gras week, but as you know, what's been dubbed as the world's largest spectacle, the celebration of carnival season in New Orleans, which culminates in Fat Tuesday, was canceled this year due to the pandemic. But that doesn't mean we don't get a taste of New Orleans. We can definitely still let the good times roll, Debbie, by celebrating what we love about the Crescent City the way we do best, and that is through film, and that is where you step in.
Absolutely. I cannot imagine a worse super spreader scenario than Mardi Gras. Where nobody cares and laissez le bon temps rouler and
oui.
So I left my beads in the closet this year, but we've got some great movies that are set in New Orleans. Some emphasize the city more than others, but they're all interesting films to say the least. So
yeah, I was going to say, just to visit New Orleans is one of my favorite American cities. It just has that certain je ne sais quoi. It has a certain feel that's unique to New Orleans. It's in the French Quarter. It permeates throughout the Garden District and the Bayou and the old plantations, really everywhere in between. It's haunting, it's mysterious, it's exciting, it's magical. And yes, you're right. I mean, a lot of these films and, in a lot of these films, really the city stars as a character alongside the actors.
Yes. And the character has a lot of different facets, as you mentioned, that's got that kind of Bourbon Street jazz feel. There's also the hoodoo and voodoo and mystery about New Orleans. There's the Bayou. And before we actually start, we would be remiss, I think, if we did not mention Spike Lee's documentary about Hurricane Katrina called When the Levees Broke, which is not on the list because it's a documentary, but it is a incredible film. If you're a doc fan, it's just an amazing, heartbreaking, wonderful documentary.
Oh, it's definitely worthwhile to spend your time. It was well done. And yeah, it brings out a lot of emotions, especially, when you're one of those people who were just glued to the television when Hurricane Katrina happened. It brings back a lot of that. So yes, you're right about that. All right, so now we're going to talk our movies. And first up on our must-see movie list, this is a film that really plays off the post-war grittiness of the French Quarter. And you not only see that in the streets, but also inside the Kowalski's apartment. And that is the excellent A Streetcar Named Desire from 1951.
And Vivian Lee's performance is, I mean, the entire movie really for me. I mean, Brando, the whole film is perfection, based on Tennessee Williams' incredible play about, you know, the long-suffering Blanche Dubois who comes to stay with her sister and her husband. The sister Stella, played by Kim Hunter, and the husband Stanley Kowalski, played by Brando. And I think most people know the story.
Yes.
And if they don't, they certainly know the image of Brando standing out on the street, calling up to Stella. And Vivian Lee's iconic line, you know, I've always relied on the kindness of strangers. It's a fantastic film. Just a little side note, after I graduated from college, I was a waitress in New York City for 3 years. And I waited on a guy who was an older gentleman, and he was telling me the story of eating in the restaurant where I worked, and Arthur Miller, the playwright, had come in.
Wow.
And he was so, you know, kind of fanning out, and he walked up to Mr. Miller and asked him if he had a match. And Arthur Miller gave him a book of matches, and this man said to him, well, thank you. I've always relied on the kindness of strangers. And Arthur Miller looked at him and said, that's Tennessee Williams.
Wrong guy. Oops.
But,
oh boy, what a story though. What a story.
It's almost better than if it had actually been Tennessee Williams.
Right. Okay, so speaking of Mr. Williams, this is probably, as you said, you know, the most known of his plays. The Broadway version was highly successful before the movie. In fact, Brando, Kim Hunter, and Carl Malden, who played Mitch, were among those who reprised their Broadway roles for the movie. And during that run on Broadway, Brando was really virtually an unknown at the time. And by the time the movie version was released, his Hollywood star power was really already on the rise. And this is the first film of 4 consecutive Academy Award acting nominations for him. So you had Streetcar, you had Viva Zapata, you had Julius Caesar, and of course, culminating with On the Waterfront, for which he won the Oscar.
And I mean, the raw talent of Brando was just undeniable. I mean,
gosh, yeah.
Granted had a look about him that appealed to Hollywood, but that kind of raw vulnerability in such a commanding presence was just an unbelievable combination. And on Broadway, Jessica Tandy played the role of Blanche Dubois, which she was replaced for the film by Vivian Leigh because of her, you know, star power. But she has an incredible depth of talent as well. So, I mean, this film is just packed.
You know, what really surprised me was that it won all the major acting awards except for Best Actor, which was Brando. It was Humphrey Bogart in The African Queen who won Best Actor that year, but Vivian Leigh and Carl Malden and Kim Hunter won for Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor and Actress. So, you know, Brando would have to wait a while to get his turn.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's the Academy for you too. They like to, you know, occasionally a young up-and-comer will win an Oscar, but, right. You know, Rami Malek comes to mind for his Freddie Mercury performance, but more often than not, the actors earn their stripes.
So we love talking about what happens behind the scene, Deb, and I found this interesting. You know, Brando definitely had a reputation for being a playboy and for being macho. I mean, whether it was true remains to be seen, but that was his MO. That was what he was known for. And he, in his autobiography, which was called Songs My Mother Taught Me, he had mentioned that he thought about hooking up with his co-star Vivian Leigh, but reconsidered because he had too much respect for Miss Lee's husband, who She was married at the time to Laurence Olivier.
Olivier.
In his words, Brando said, "I might have given her a tumble if it hadn't been for Larry Olivier. I liked him too much to invade his chicken coop." So it was most definitely a different time.
I know. I love, like, it's like the woman has no say.
Well, I reconsidered. I thought about it, but I reconsidered. But because I had respect for Larry Olivier, of course, he'd call Sir Laurence Olivier Larry.
Larry.
And one other, you mentioned the iconic scene where he's yelling Stella. And another iconic look from this movie was, of course, Marlon Brando's tight t-shirts. Well, at the time, they didn't have those fitted shirts, the snug fit that you envision when you think of Brando as Stanley. They actually had to rewash just regular t-shirts a few times to get that look, and then they were stitched in the back to make them snug. So that's how Brando got that look of Stanley Kowalski, that brutish rough and tumble New Orleans guy.
I guess they couldn't, run out and buy a smaller size t-shirt. That was too easy.
Well, that was too easy. This is Hollywood craftsmanship we're talking
about. We need $10,000 to make these t-shirts right.
All right, so we're going to move on to 1958. And this next movie is based on the novel called A Stone for Danny Fisher, and it was a novel by Harold Robbins. And we're talking about the movie King Creole, starring Elvis Presley.
Now, the one review I love, what I was reading about this film, and the one review I love was the reviewer said that this was by far and away Presley's best movie, and that he had evolved so much as an actor. And then he said, relatively speaking, his earlier films, he was a laughing stock. So he goes from an F grade acting to about a C+ grade acting in this film.
Hey, it's an improvement.
And it is an improvement. It's still not enough for him, I think, to pull off this role, which is a very gritty, powerful. And this movie's sort of, West Side Story meets, I'm trying to think of some other, it's very gritty. It's very New Orleans. Presley's presence in the film gives a sort of beach blanket bingo component to it.
Yes.
He lacks the gravitas, I guess, let's say. But, the music is incredible. It has some of his great songs in it. The soundtrack is fantastic. And it's a really interesting story. It's a serious drama. And, with no sort of happily ever after for really any of the characters. It's his, big leap at trying to break into serious film. And he does a pretty good job. And the movie is very New Orleans, very gritty, it takes place mostly in the French Quarter. Elvis Presley was granted a deferment from the military to make this film.
Yes.
And he has said up until his death that it's the role he's most proud of, and it was his favorite role to play.
Which is great. It really makes me wonder, like you said, he didn't really have that gravitas, but he was Elvis Presley. So the film was a huge hit at the box office. So this one really surprised me because I wasn't familiar with A Stone for Danny Fisher. Elvis plays Danny Fisher. In the book, Danny Fisher was a boxer from New York City. And the film adaptation was initially to star James Dean in the role of Danny Fisher. But then, after James Dean died in 1955, the screenplay was reworked to have Danny be a singer in New Orleans, more tailor-made for Elvis. But, that really makes me wonder, indifferent, what that would have done.
I agree. Just imagining James Dean in that role as a boxer. That could have been an iconic film for sure.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So we're going to move on to the following year, which was 1959. This is another movie based on a Tennessee Williams play described as a Southern Gothic mystery. This time, my God, what a lineup. Elizabeth Taylor, Katharine Hepburn, Montgomery Clift, and that is Suddenly Last Summer.
Now, this movie I recommend wholeheartedly. This movie is every bit New Orleans, and it's a great suspense film. Elizabeth Taylor, when the film starts, is institutionalized. Some event happened on a European vacation where her cousin died mysteriously. She has no recollection of what happened. Katharine Hepburn plays the young man's mother, who's institutionalized Elizabeth Taylor's character and is trying to bribe the hospital to have her lobotomized. She so profoundly does not want Elizabeth Taylor's character to remember what happened.
Which is creepy enough, just that.
And I mean, a lobotomy is like, okay, 1950s, like, but honestly, when I watch this film, I think it has incredible potential for a modern adaptation. That whole mental institution horror film trope is so good. And, we talked about the movie Unsanity, the Steven Soderbergh film several weeks ago. It always is a winner for, everyone's just scared of mental hospitals. And Montgomery Clift, who is fantastic to watch on screen, plays the doctor who's evaluating Liz Taylor's character. And it's interesting there. I mean, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but okay, I'm not even going to say what I was going to say.
The way it unravels is really, I think just very gripping, and it really leaves you with an uneasy feeling. And that's really all we're going to say about it. We talked about how this is another Tennessee Williams play. Streetcar was in 1951. The year prior, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof was released, also another Tennessee Williams play. And then this one in 59. This play also hints at homosexuality, even more so than the previous two. The theme was definitely explored a lot more in the plays, but this was a revelation to me. There was something called the production code, where the films at the time, they were limited in terms of how far they can go, because you can't violate that code of, production code. So I found that really interesting. So like you said, it might be something that would make for a really good remake if you're able to explore some of those themes further. I would see that.
I agree totally. And that, that component, that LGBT component of the film could be, peeled back a bit more now. So I think it could even enrich the story like that. And, Montgomery Clift was gay, and it must have been a real conflict for him emotionally to work in an industry that so closeted.
Sure.
Not just the actors, but the storylines as well. So anyway, Suddenly Last Summer.
Suddenly Last Summer. Put that on your list.
2021 film.
Wow, yeah. All right, so our next film, we're going to jump into the 1970s, 1973 to be exact. And we are going to talk about Live and Let Die, the 8th film in the James Bond series, the first one starring Roger Moore.
And, Roger Moore is no one's favorite James Bond. I don't think he had the...
I liked him.
I liked him too, but, Sean Connery has all of our hearts, I think.
Yes.
And certainly Daniel Craig has the next generation's hearts.
Yeah.
But Roger Moore had the misfortune of taking over the role just as the fashion trends turned in a very bad way. So, everyone, when you think of Roger Moore's James Bond, you think of him in that pale blue leisure suit with the Sansevelt slacks, and
yes.
Not the James Bond of our imaginations. But this film is, has a big section that's set in New Orleans. James Bond is chasing a heroin dealer in New York and a dictator of a small
it was a fictional country, right?
Country in the Caribbean. And Jane Seymour plays a virgin not for long. Spoiler alert. James Bond deflowers her. Tarot card reader who can see the future. but when her virginity is taken, she loses her skills.
What was that all about?
Hair being cut, I guess. And so Roger Moore flees with her from the evil heroin dealer to New Orleans. There's flyboat races through the bayou, and Roger Moore has one of the best James Bond escapes of all times, because if you can't embrace your willing suspension of disbelief in a James Bond film, then there's just no point in watching it, because in this one he jumps over a row of the backs of alligators,
Yes,
who are all lined up to escape the bayou. That's good stuff.
Which is awesome. Yes.
There's a Shark Tank, which was notoriously spoofed in Dr. Evil and Austin Powers.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, I forgot that it came from that. Yes.
And the death of a villain by swallowing a pill of compressed air from a shark tranquilizer gun that explodes him. I mean, this is good stuff.
This is good stuff. Yes. Oh my gosh. And another first for the James Bond series, this is the first Bond movie in which 007 has a fling with a Black woman. So 1973, Bond hooks up with Rosie Carver, who was played by Gloria Hendry, of course. But the scenes involving the scenes involving Bond and Carver had to be deleted when the movie was released in South Africa due to apartheid. But, this movie broke barriers in that sense. And also the first Bond movie to feature a rock and roll song in the opening credits, of course. How can you forget Live and Let Die? Yes.
Great song. I mean, those Bond themes are all fantastic, but this one stands out for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. Okay, so next on our list is perhaps the film that most depicts the feel and flavor of New Orleans, I think. The city is definitely a major character in the movie, and that is The Big Easy. And that is from 1986, starring Dennis Quaid, Ellen Barkin, John Goodman. I mean, the list goes on.
I mean, I think the true barometer for a film, whether you could call it a New Orleans film, is if the Mardi Gras warehouse is a setting for one of the scenes. And
I've been in that warehouse. It's kind of creepy, Deb. It's very creepy.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's creepy for sure. Dennis Quaid, in my eyes, can do no wrong. He, from Inner Space, to you name it. I love him.
With you. And he's very pretty to look at.
Very pretty to look at, and he only gets better looking as time goes on. It's amazing. He's, just fantastic. He's got, it's our New Orleans. We need a fan.
Yes, the humidity, the heat.
And in this film, he plays Remy, he's a corrupt cop. He takes payoffs. He is sort of a typical member of a corrupt New Orleans police force, the Big Easy. He has a good accent. I'm an accent snob. I cannot stand it when an actor uses a bad accent. It really takes me out of the film.
I think he was good in this one, yeah.
And he was. And Ellen Barkin plays an attorney who is prosecuting the corrupt police officers and the New Orleans Police Department, but is also struck up a relationship with Dennis Quaid's character. So this film sets a great conflict up right from the get-go, which is she is attracted to him and is falling in love with him, but realizes that he's one of the cops that she's going to be prosecuting. Boom. Good setup from the get-go. There's a lot going on. Ellen Barkin, who plays the female love interest, the attorney, the prosecuting attorney, she's not my favorite. She has a likability issue. I sort of think of her as like the Katherine Heigl of the previous generation. Like, it's just, she's okay.
Yes.
But she's great in this film. She's, it's really the Dennis Quaid show. And if you love Dennis Quaid, this is
which we do.
Film. And New Orleans is obviously the other co-star here. And they do a really nice job of not only showing the city, but the life.
Oh gosh, yeah. And, we talked about how the role really was perfect for Dennis Quaid. In a later interview, Deb, he admitted that he was at the height of his cocaine addiction while filming this movie. He had revealed, as we've talked about this before, that cocaine figured into the budgets of movies back then. It was like a line item. And he did confirm that for this movie. He said it was like petty cash, thinly disguised in movie budgets. He said in an interview in Newsweek that by that time he was a mess. He said, quote, "I was getting an hour of sleep a night. I'd wake up, snort a line, and swear I wasn't going to do it again that day. But then by 4 o'clock, I'd be right back down the same road, like a squirrel on one of those treadmills. The lack of sleep made it so my focus wasn't really there, which affected my acting." I couldn't tell. I don't know if you could, but
I mean, it's, boy, these actors and their battles with addiction are horrible to hear about. You think, I mean, Matthew Perry tells a story from filming the TV show Friends that he doesn't remember one season, a season, not an episode,
a whole season
of the show.
Yes.
Dennis Quaid, I thought, did a great job. And, I guess it just shows the true depth of talent that he can sort of go on autopilot.
Right. But we also talked about that with Melanie Griffith in Working Girl.
Yeah. And, I'm just, grateful he got healthy and sober and is still making great films and survived that, because, good Lord, of all the addictions, you think cocaine is just for a guy his age. Wow.
Definitely a tough go. It's important to note one interesting cameo in this film, and that is Jim Garrison, who was district attorney in New Orleans in the 60s and early 70s. And I'm mentioning that, well, he appears as a judge in the movie The Big Easy. It's worth mentioning because our next film is all about Jim Garrison and perhaps the case that he's most known for, and that is the premise of the Oliver Stone film, our next film, JFK.
And this movie, wow. I mean,
a lot to unpack.
A lot to unpack. And all I kept thinking the whole time is, imagine if Facebook existed in 1963. I mean, the way people run with conspiracies on Facebook, from, furniture makers trafficking children and pizza parlors and QAnon and rigged elections, and I mean, whatever you want to throw down, whether or not there's merit to anything, it's a rabbit hole of, lunacy. And the JFK assassination has always been ripe with conspiracy theories that have never died. I think many, many people to this day do not believe that Lee Harvey Oswald shot John F. Kennedy with one bullet from the book depository on Daley Plaza in Dallas. But the problem with the film for me, and the problem with the conspiracy theories, is that from that nugget, they explode into the mob, the government, the CIA, Cuba. Like, I need one good theory to do. And Jim Garrison, who's played by Kevin Costner in this film, and this is a great film. It just explores this co-conspiracy theory side of the Kennedy assassination, with Tommy Lee Jones playing this sort of key player. It's set in New Orleans. Garrison was a DA in New Orleans. Kevin Bacon, I mean, this cast reads like an Oscar party invitation.
Oh gosh, Gary Oldman,
Jack Lemmon, Walter Matthau, Ed Asner, Sissy Spacek, Joe Pesci. It's a fascinating film, and you can see Garrison, how he was consumed by unraveling, this, it's pulling on this thread that was unraveling this whole sweater of conspiracy with the Kennedy assassination. And, it just, what was interesting to me is Garrison actually takes this case to trial. He takes Tommy Lee Jones's character, he prosecutes him for conspiracy in the death of John F. Kennedy. And the jury acquits in 1 hour. And I mean, Garrison, his personal life has gone to hell. His career's in the shitter. He has nothing but this conspiracy he's trying to unravel. And the jury, after being polled after the acquittal, said they 100% all believe that there is a conspiracy involved with the shooting of John F. Kennedy, but that the prosecution did not present enough evidence to convict the Tommy Lee Jones character. So anyway, it's a wild movie, and if you're a conspiracy buff, this is the film for you.
This is your movie.
Yeah.
You know, it's fascinating to see how that conspiracy, you know, as you said, consumed Jim Garrison, and decades later, it would also consume Oliver Stone. I mean, he was all about this, and to this day, apparently, he's still defending the film and what he still believes what happened against those who say he made up some things in the movie. Gosh, Deb, the film is 30 years old this year.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
And Oliver Stone for 30 years has been, you know, really defending his work in this movie. He still maintains, for the most part, that the film is solid. So take that for what, you know, so
I'm not a conspiracy buff, but this film really gives you something to think about.
Makes you think. It makes you think. And so speaking of the real Jim Garrison, he too has a cameo again in this movie, and he is Supreme Court Justice Earl Warren in JFK, the movie about him.
Yes.
So Jim Garrison really made use of his fame, and that's what happened. And so in the movie, Kevin Costner's Jim Garrison, the Garrisons had a family dog, and for the dog, Oliver Stone was able to borrow a Labrador Retriever owned by New Orleans native and author Anne Rice. And we are mentioning that because we are going to move on to our next movie. It's an Anne Rice classic set in late 18th century New Orleans, and it's a scary, creepy, whatever, Interview with a Vampire from 1994.
And this movie, I will say, is significant because it is my entire hall pass. It is Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, Christian Slater, and Antonio Banderas.
Yeah.
Movie.
You're
That's
right.
Hall pass.
Yes, good catch. I didn't even think of that lineup. I was thinking of Pitt and Cruise, but oh my God, Banderas too. Yes.
So the film is told in flashback. Christian Slater plays a journalist interviewing the Brad Pitt character, who is vampire.
Who claims he's a vampire.
Claims to be a vampire, and goes back in the story and walks the Christian Slater character, the interview, I think his name's Malloy in the movie, and sort of walks him through his life and what has happened to him. And, you know, Kirsten Dunst memorably plays the child in the film. And
the little girl, yeah.
She's, you know, now 45 or whatever. But that was her big breakout role as the child who was turned by Lestat, who's played by Tom Cruise. One of his best performances for sure. You know, this is a great, it could have been more New Orleans for me than it was, especially considering Anne Rice is a native. It has nice, eerie moments, but the film is expansive and, you know, it's set in 3 or 4 different cities. But, you know, it's a home run, this movie. Great, creepy, gothic, intriguing, everything. And the acting's incredible.
I went into the theater with trepidation because I kind of knew what was in store, but I had to see it. I mean, if you see Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt and Banderas and Christian Slater in one movie, you're going to see that movie. Yeah. My gosh, what a film. And you know, we had talked about this in terms of how tall or not actors really are. And you know, Tom Cruise is 5'7" in real life. So he apparently stood on an elevated platform for when he was in scenes with the other vampires, just so he can make up
I mean,
make up for the height difference.
it makes the shot look great, but just imagine like the other actors standing around and like Tom Cruise walking up and then getting up on his box like a little kid, like a booster seat.
Playing dressed up like a vampire.
Okay, let me get on my box and we can start.
So that happened behind the scenes.
Action.
Dunst was, I think, 10 or 11 when this movie was filmed. She had her first on-screen kiss in this movie with Brad Pitt. And she thought at the time it was gross and that, thinking that Brad had cooties, but, she was 10. But what a memorable her first on-screen kiss. And speaking of Brad Pitt, this wasn't a fun time for him filming it. Apparently he suffered a bout of depression because the scenes were mostly set in nighttime, and it was just depressing he called it 6 months of effing darkness. And he reportedly suffered depression. He was said to be so miserable at one point that he even tried to buy himself out of the contract. And when he was told it was going to cost, about $40 million, he rethought that plan. But yeah, because the shooting took place mainly at night. And when they were in London to shoot those scenes, it was in the middle of winter. So you can just imagine the misery that he was feeling.
Yeah. I guess that paycheck takes a little of the sting out of it.
I guess so. All right, so our next movie is from 2003, and you can't have a movie list about New Orleans movies without having a movie by John Grisham. And our movie from 2003 is Runaway Jury with John Cusack, Gene Hackman, Rachel Weisz, Dustin Hoffman. Oh my gosh, another stellar lineup.
And I will say this is not the most New Orleans movie on our list.
No, it's not.
It is, however, one of my favorite movies on the list by a mile.
When I saw that on your list, I wanted to see it again.
It's my favorite Grisham novel. It's my favorite Grisham film. It is the premise of the film is in New Orleans at a financial firm years before there's a shooting. A day trader goes kind of postal and walks into this financial firm and blows everybody away. One of the men who's killed, who's played by Dylan McDermott, or Dermot Mulrooney, one of the two.
One of the two, and yes.
And his widow brings a lawsuit against the firearms company. It's a great premise. These lawsuits happen. There's, the gun manufacturers are constantly defending situations like this, effectively, I might add. But this case is this widow bringing this lawsuit against this gun manufacturer for wrongful death of her husband. And Gene Hackman's character is a jury consultant. And this is where Grisham gets great. Gene Hackman's, listening in on the voir dire and the impaneling of the jury and saying, cut that guy, pick that guy. She's, she won't side with us. Totally just analyzing body language and psychologically profiling the people based on the answers to the questions.
Which was so much fun to watch.
Oh my God, fascinating.
Yeah.
And then you have the juror, Nick Easter, who is played by John Cusack, who is on the jury. He's put on the jury despite the fact that the Gene Hackman character does not want him. And very quickly, the John Cusack character establishes himself as the influencer. Great cast. And Dustin Hoffman plays the plaintiff's attorney. Bruce Davidson plays the defense attorney. Jeremy Piven. John Cusack always seems to find a way to get Jeremy Piven.
Funny, yes.
He's like, Jeremy Piven chose the right, wagon to hitch his star to. But yeah, the cast is incredible, and it's just a fantastic movie.
So we mentioned Gene Hackman and Dustin Hoffman. Deb, did you know this is their first film together, but they've been friends since the mid 50s.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So these two were classmates at the Pasadena Playhouse, which was a theater group. And reportedly, they were both voted less likely to succeed. And can they get any more wrong? But that was Gene Hackman, Dustin Hoffman. No, I mean, they're household names. So that was kind of funny to find out. And for his part, this is Gene Hackman's third Grisham film. He was also in The Client and The Chamber, and different characters for each. But gosh, just because he's Gene Hackman, he does so well in all of them.
Everything he does is magic. I mean, from Hoosiers to Runaway Jury, Gene Hackman, Behind Enemy Lines. If you haven't seen it, another great Gene Hackman film.
Yes.
He's just a pleasure to watch on screen.
Yes, he certainly is. All right, so our next film is probably the one I'm most unfamiliar with, but it sounds like it has all the elements of a creepy New Orleans movie: voodoo, the bayou, cemeteries, eerie plantation homes, and that is the movie from 2005, The Skeleton Key.
Now, I'll tell you right off the bat, this movie was not well reviewed, and I'll tell you why. It's technically a horror film.
From the looks of it, yeah.
In general, are poorly reviewed. They're low budget. They're typically, no star quality in the cast. And the biggest reason, and it's the reason this movie gets bad reviews, is they're considered formulaic. They follow this very well-tread path. I have no problem with formulaic, ever. I mean, give me a romantic comedy. You know exactly what's going to happen. Boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back, and they're happy at the end. I have no problem with that at all. The horror movie, same situation. Character gets in an unfamiliar situation. Evil forces are present. Somebody gets killed,
Right.
The person dies, whatever. So this film stars Kate Hudson as a hospice nurse caregiver who quits a job at a retirement home and goes to work in this great, New Orleans plantation house, caring for the husband of the Jenna Rollins character, whose name is Violet. And, they all have names like Violet and Remy and
Blanche.
and all. So she gets down there, and sure enough, some strange things start to occur that all have to do with the sort of hoodoo, magic, mysticism that New Orleans is so known for.
Right.
And it's hard to really kind of nutshell this plot. But the more Kate Hudson investigates, the more weirdness starts to happen. The husband is incapacitated, partially paralyzed, and he believes it's because someone's put a spell on him. And Kate Hudson's character, the eye roll and, oh my God, this poor guy, and it's psychological, and she's got it. But then she figures if she's going to help him, she has to jump into the psychology of it, and tries to figure out a way to, remove the curse for him, which involves the attic of this plantation home and the skeleton key referenced in the title that unlocks the door, which turns out there were two African-American servants in the plantation home centuries ago who performed these rituals. Just watch the movie if you're in the mood for a really good, really scary horror film.
The trailer was definitely intriguing, and it had, just the trailer gave you the heebie-jeebies already. Yeah. And, from what I could tell, the acting was pretty solid, not only with Kate Hudson and Jenna Rollins, but also Peter Sarsgaard's in the film.
Yes.
And he can be really creepy if he wanted to.
I mean, we know from Girl with the Dragon Tattoo how creepy he can be. He plays the estate attorney who's helping the Jenna Rollins character and kind of the Kate Hudson character, and you don't really know where he falls in the good to evil scale.
which is what he does really well.
Really well.
Yes, that actor, my goodness. Okay, so that is on my list because I'm very, very intrigued by it. And who's not down for a good scare?
Yeah, a good New Orleans scare.
Exactly. All right, so our next movie is from 2008. It is loosely based on an F. Scott Fitzgerald short story of the same name, and that is The Curious Case of Benjamin Button.
This movie, I know it got all kinds of Oscar nominations and it was lauded massively. I still think it was underrated. I adore this film. It is a David Fincher film about a man who ages in reverse. The story begins with the main female character, I think her name's Daisy, on her deathbed, telling her daughter the story of Benjamin Button, who is her biological father, and the girl has not known this ever. And it's set just as Hurricane Katrina is about to hit New Orleans.
Right.
So there's, rain thumping the glass, and there's this very powerful sense of impending doom. And so the Cate Blanchett character tells the story of the man who was born an old man and ages in reverse. And it all, there's symbolic, the clock and the clock tower of the train station that ticks backwards. So the clockmaker made it to bring the men back from war who had died, who could live their lives, in sort of a 2.0 situation. Anyway, it's just this epic tale. Brad Pitt plays Benjamin Button. Cate Blanchett plays Daisy, the love interest, and she's aging normally and he's aging in reverse. And then at one point in the film, they meet at that perfect moment.
And you were waiting for that moment because you knew it was going to happen.
And because they meet here and they meet here and they meet here, and you're like,
right.
And then so it's magical, this film. I absolutely love it. It kind of, it's in the same way I loved the movie Big Fish with Billy Crudup and Albert Finney, which is another one like this, epic and emotional and really, really just cool and thought-provoking. Brad Pitt lost out and it was nominated for the Oscar, which in my opinion, he should have won. He lost out to Sean Penn for Milk. The Academy loves films that latch on to important issues, and certainly Milk is one of those films. But to compare the two movies, in my mind, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button is a far superior film. And that's people will disagree, and that's fine. And Sean Penn certainly deserved an Oscar for that role. He was incredible.
He did, yes.
But Brad Pitt was better.
But this was, if given a choice, which film I'd see again, I'd go with Benjamin Button just because.
And which performance you remember.
Yeah.
And which film you remember. It's, they always say like Tom Cruise lost out, and I'm apologize if I'm remembering this wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Tom Cruise lost the Oscar for Jerry Maguire to Jeffrey Rush for Shine.
And
if you ask anybody which performance you remember, which film you remember, come on.
Exactly.
No comparison. But, the Academy gets it wrong every once in a while, as we discussed last week with Saving Private Ryan. I almost said Saving Private Benjamin.
No. Yes.
Saving Private
Ryan versus Shakespeare in Love. Yeah.
It's not a hideous mistake, but Brad Pitt certainly gives an Oscar-worthy performance in this film, for sure.
I completely agree. A lot of scenes that were just memorable, and you definitely associate this movie with Brad Pitt. All right, so we are at the end of our list. For those of you who are waiting for a good laugh out loud comedy, bordering on raunchy, but it was so much fun to watch, and that is the movie Girls Trip. Queen Latifah, Regina Hall, Tiffany Haddish, and Jada Pinkett Smith.
It's funny. I actually saw Tiffany Haddish host SNL before I saw this movie. the movie is what kind of introduced her, it was her big break.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And she came out on the stage to do her monologue, and she was wearing a white Prada dress. And she said, she spent almost the whole monologue talking about the dress. She said, this was the dress she wore on the red carpet to the premiere of Girls Trip. And when she put it on to host the show, a friend of hers said, you can't wear that dress, you've already worn it. And I mean, it is the funniest 3 minutes of her explaining how the dress costs $8,000 and she's going to wear it every single day.
Of course she can wear it. She looked great in it.
I know. And she was like, so get ready, because you're going to see this dress a million times. And I was sitting in my living room watching Saturday Night Live thinking, this girl I love. And so Girls Trip, which is, we've talked about this film before. This is just a great ensemble comedy with Jada Pinkett Smith and Queen Latifah and Tiffany Haddish and Regina Hall and the 4 female friends, and there's infidelity and career issues and loneliness and hookups and romance, and it's just a great fun story and fantastic New Orleans. The whole film is basically set in the French Quarter.
Yes, it was shot during the Essence Festival in New Orleans. So yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it is a really fun, funny, well-acted film.
And you can really tell the chemistry with the co-stars. I mean, these ladies actually get along in real life. This movie is notable for being the first film made by and starring an all-Black cast to earn $100 million at the box office. And, so successful. And people were really surprised at how much they love this movie.
Yeah, and it's great. Not only that it's an all African-American cast, but largely an all-female cast.
Yes.
Which is spectacular. And the women are all likable and fun and talented. And, obviously, as we have discussed, sometimes the off-screen relationship doesn't reflect what happens on screen. But in this case, I guess it does. And that's, their friendship leaches onto the screen very effectively. They're all just so fun to watch. I mean, and then a nice cameo by Mike Epps, who seems to reprise his role as Black Doug from The Hangover, playing the
oh gosh, Black Doug.
Really carving out a niche for himself. But yeah, it's the show, the movie is these 4 women. And it's a fun, if you liked Bridesmaids, that kind of a feel, it's definitely right there.
And with a comedic pedigree among some of the ladies, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of those scenes were improvised.
Yeah.
Because you can see that happening with these stars.
Well, you got to walk on set with Queen Latifah with your heart pounding, because I mean, this is just my imagination, but I think she's so talented and such a good comic presence that she could improvise like crazy.
And I think, she really can do it all. She can do drama, comedy, musical, whatever you throw at her. She is great at it. So if, in case you were in doubt about how these co-stars really gelled, Tiffany Haddish says there was a 2-hour Zoom meeting among them last year to discuss a possible sequel. So there are plenty of ideas on the table from what we hear, including not even making a sequel at all, but just instead making a different film starring the main stars of Girls Trip.
Oh, interesting. Well, it'd be interesting to reprise those characters too, because they leave a lot of stuff kind of open-ended. So, there's fertile soil for a sequel for sure.
Oh yeah, I'd be looking forward to something like that. All right, that is our list for this week. Memories of New Orleans, frolicking along Canal Street, the riverfront. I can't wait till we can all safely travel again. And that makes me want to put New Orleans near the top of my list. Just sipping in Cafe du Monde, sipping that cafe au lait is heaven to me.
Yeah.
Early morning. Yeah.
A beignet or 2 or 3 or 4 to go with it.
Yes, we're not going to judge. You can have as many beignets as you want. You know, the trick for really enjoying a good cafe au lait at Cafe du Monde is to get there as the sun rises. Nobody there. You have the place all to yourself, and it's quiet. The river's right there. It is the most heavenly feeling in the world. And, you know, every time we go to New Orleans, I sacrifice getting up at like 5:30 in the morning to just stay there as the sun is rising. It's the best thing.
Oh, that's awesome. And you're not coming in on the back end of the night for that? It's your
No, we're not. We are not. At least we're not going to admit that. All right. So before we say goodbye, we are ending on a sweet note. And to go along with our carnival season theme, Debbie, our featured treat this week is called Circus Bark. And we have a concoction of caramel, dark chocolate, pretzels, popcorn, peanuts, and marshmallow, all atop a graham cracker crust.
Oh my God, that sounds so good. It makes me wish I was high right now.
We've pretty much thrown everything. Yes, and so I was experimenting with
covered. What else is in here we can put on this?
I know. You know what? It's so funny because as I was experimenting with this, I shared some with my nephew who's 10, and he's giving me feedback. What else can you put on there?
Look, here's some frosted flakes. Throw those in.
Yeah, gummies? No, I don't like gummies. Maybe fruit.
Oh my God, that sounds awesome.
But my goodness, it is so good. It's like the candy bark of your dreams. And, you know, why not live it up for Mardi Gras?
Yes, 100%. There's no restrictions in place for Mardi Gras.
Yes, yes. All right. And you can always find all the recipes we feature on the Sip series, on the Stir, on gazellemagazine.com. So, you know, don't fret that you don't have the recipe, but really you just throw everything atop graham crackers and you drizzle it with caramel. That's pretty much it.
Look in your cupboard for anything to eat.
So easy, and so yummy. So we are out of time. We hope that you are looking forward to hours of binging from the comfort of your own couch, just like Debbie and I are. Hey, you know, that's instant weekend plans. So enjoy.
I'm firing up Runaway Jury like right when I hang up with you.
Yeah, I've got like at least 2 or 3 films from this list. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Debbie Baldwin. And we will see you again next time.
Thanks.